Oh, what do we have here? Oh, fancy. Oh, you're fancy too. Well, with heroes like this, Elysium's in good hands. Hello, Internet Magic Man here from MMOBomb.com, and it's finally time to take our first look at Throne and Liberty, the free-to-play MMORPG developed by NCSoft and published by Amazon Games in most regions outside of Korea. Now, we're going to spend some time taking you through some of what the game has to offer, giving you our first impressions of the game, and if you like the video, hey, maybe toss me a thumbs up, a subscribe, and come on over to MMOBomb.com and leave your own review for your fellow gamers on our Throne and Liberty game page. So let's dive in. All right, Throne and Liberty is, at its core, a tab target MMO that utilizes a hybrid combat system. You're able to stick to a more traditional tab targeting control scheme or opt for a more action-y type control where moving the mouse rotates your camera automatically and no mouse cursor is present unless you tap that Alt key. Getting started with character creation here, it's actually pretty robust. The creation tool allows for a ton of celebrity likenesses and some absolute monstrosities to be created if you're so inclined. Now, you'll have a ton of options for customization. Skin tones have a wide variety of options too, including darker colors that many MMOs seem to ignore, and you'll probably get pretty close to the look you're after. There's even a neat option to use a photo of you or someone else to have the system try to generate that photo as a character, but of course you'll be signing away some permissions on that photo to Amazon, so make sure to read the disclaimer. Don't worry about naming your character here, though. That actually happens later in the tutorial. It's very typical, the MMO tutorial is a dream and then you wake up type stuff. While we're working our way through the tutorial a bit here, there are a few things that I think you should know right off the rip. Throne and Liberty's tutorial will walk you through all the systems and controls as you would probably expect, but it doesn't actually do the best job of it. And by the time you learn about certain things, you may have already made certain choices. And while you can certainly just go in and play with no prior knowledge, Throne is an MMO that you're best served doing a bit of out-of-game research before you even boot it up. Rather than picking a class, Throne takes the whole your weapons determine your abilities approach that we've seen in other MMOs. However, if you don't know what type of playstyle you want to play at the start, you could be putting yourself a bit behind when it comes to leveling weapon skills, upgrading gear, and learning your weapon specializations. It's not quite old school levels of MMO unrecoverable builds here, but making changes later after you've spent resources can put you in a spot to have to regrind some things. Since the game has been released in Korea for a while now and has undergone multiple testing phases, there's already online guides that will show you what weapon combinations are best served for those that maybe want to heal or play tank or do a particular type of DPS, and I would highly suggest checking out those guides before you start sinking resources into your equipment. You most likely won't be totally foobar if you don't do the research, but you could delay some progress while you have to refarm weapon specialization points and such. This is just a first look video, obviously, and not a full guide, so we're not going to cover builds and such here, so peek around the internet and find a source that you trust. In addition, Throne and Liberty is cross-platform, being available on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. However, it's not cross-progression. So if you do decide to play on multiple platforms, each will have its own account. You can't transfer characters from your early access server to post-launch servers if you were a Founders Pack purchaser that played on those early access servers too. So your friends playing post-launch, they can roll on early access servers if there's room, but if you want to play on the launch servers with friends and you were an early access player, you're going to need to roll a new character on those launch servers. Currently, you only have a few character slots to play with, and deleting characters takes like 3 days real time for some reason, so choose wisely. And speaking of your account, there is no player trading, so you can't really funnel things to your alts, but the cash shop currency called Lucent is account-wide. The Battle Pass and the one-time per character leveling pass are both character-specific too, and there are free and premium versions of both passes, but I'll cover that when we get to the cash shop section. All right, now that we have those kind of basics out of the way, let's get into the game a bit. Throne and Liberty, if you're using the classic control scheme that I am, is a WASD movement, hold mouse button to move the camera, control scheme typical of tab target MMOs. On PC, there is native controller support if you'd like to play with a controller in your hands, but I will point out that while the implementation is pretty good, it isn't perfect. Through multiple playtest sessions and playing on both PC and Xbox, in my experience, I've seen some pretty big dead zones on PC controllers, some lag here and there, particularly in the menus, and I'm not sure that the controller will actually hold up well if you take part in the large-scale PvP, where fast targeting may be pretty important. On the console side of things, I've also tried hooking up a mouse and a keyboard to both the Xbox and PlayStation 5 versions, with very mixed results since it isn't natively supported on either yet. Sometimes I could get one peripheral to work okay, sometimes none would be recognized, and in doing some internet searching, I see a lot of users having the same issues. So until the team adds console, mouse, and keyboard support officially, your mileage on that one will probably vary. Developed in Unreal Engine 4, Throne actually has an aesthetic I quite like. I know it won't look as sexy as some other MMOs out there, particularly those coming out via Unreal Engine 5, but I like the charm of the high fantasy type world. Scaling does seem to be a bit off here and there on some buildings, but it suits my taste just fine, and the character models are actually really pretty in most cases. From a story perspective, there's an awful lot of typical MMO tropes here. Starts with a dream, big baddie is after all the Paul Stanleys of the world, of which you happen to be one, and if you get that reference, hit me up in the comments. Most mainline quests and many side quests are voice acted in either English, Korean, or Japanese, your choice. Text options include those three languages, but then they also add in Spanish, French, German, and Brazilian Portuguese too. And the voice acting isn't all that bad, actually. We've certainly seen worse recently, and the story is delivered in a way I quite like. And that's a common occurrence for me in Throne and Liberty. It does a lot of little things in a way that adds to the overall presentation. The slight narration of the main story as you complete quests or accept new quests. The way the camera spins around a new area and a voiceover gives you a bit of information about that area when you first touch the area's teleport stone. The way the in-menu codex guides you through each chapter and lays out a map for the main story and its sometimes branching paths. These are all great touches that add to the overall feel of the game. And damn if the game doesn't have one of the slickest teleports in MMOs today. I love the porting and how you're just there without a loading screen. Here. Watch. I don't know. That's just so satisfying to me. It's slick. What's also satisfying is the game's traversal mechanics. Your character can morph into various forms. Some let you run fast across land as a wolf, for example, while others let you glide through the air or swim through the water at speeds faster than your normal movement speed. There's also a hook shot that you can use on dedicated grapple points in the terrain to scale up cliff faces. Movement itself feels good, and collecting new morph forms is kind of awesome. These morphs also level, not the individual morphs themselves, but the category of morph. Using your ground morph, for example, will cause all of your ground morphs to get a certain bonus over time. Maybe they become faster, for example. So, if you have a chance to use a morph, don't question whether you should. You absolutely should. And it's some of these little things that Throne and Liberty doesn't quite nail too, though. Combat, for the most part, is fine. It's not stellar, but it's not terrible. There are some oddities to certain abilities, and the camera doesn't always rotate with some of your movement-based abilities. Wielding knives, I had an ability that dashes at an enemy and causes me to end the attack behind the target. However, by default, my camera, in classic mode again, doesn't actually travel with my character, so I end up looking at me on the other side of the enemy from where my character started using the ability. Oh, in the settings, do yourself a favor really quickly and go check the option to auto-target the nearest enemy when attacking without a target. It'll save you from wailing away a bunch of skills on nothing when the first target you were attacking in a pack dies, and you can thank me later in the comments if you didn't know about that setting. There's additional camera options you can edit too, and even more you can change if you're, a little INI file savvy. But this is an MMO that you'll need to experiment in combat and in the settings a bit just to find that perfect middle ground for you and to get rid of some of the clunky you'll likely find in combat, like the default dodge key binding to Q. I didn't like that, and I changed it right away. Content-wise, you may have been hearing that Throne and Liberty is a PvP-focused MMO, and I debate that a little bit. However, yes, there is PvP to be had. And yes, PvP modes like the Guild Castle Sieges have been used to advertise the hell out of the game for over a year now. But PvP is actually limited to very specific events, times, and modes. You aren't going to be out in the open world doing PvP. In fact, while the game is an open world, technically, you're teleporting around so often, you may lose a bit of the open world feeling now and then. That doesn't mean the MMO is exactly PvE focused either, though. In fact, I'd say Throne and Liberty is more guild focused than anything else. In an age where more and more MMORPGs are adding content catering to solo players, which I do enjoy, Throne and Liberty really wants you to be in a guild more than anything else. You're not only enticed to join one, but you and your guild are rewarded for doing things together. While server milestones may open new content and boss fights over time or as the server accomplishes things, there's also guild milestones where your guild can get new tasks by achieving other things together. On the PvP side of things, there's arenas, guild castle sieges to decide ownership of castles and taxation of delivery routes, and contested events in the open world that allow PvP for those entering them. There's also open world dungeons that, while they house PvE content like bosses, will allow PvP to take place at the same time if you access them during Throne's night cycle. During the day, these open world dungeons are only PvE, no PvP allowed. One full day-night cycle, by the way, is about 5 hours, with the daytime being 4 hours and the nighttime being 1 hour long each. For God's sake, please, don't use the teleport stone to an open dungeon at night unless you want to be murked as soon as you port in. Most of the PvP is reserved for max level, and these specific instances. And now, while they'll be adding PvP zones in the future, there aren't any here yet. That means you have to be very particular about when you're playing to actually do PvP, so check the schedules and make sure you're there on time. Flip side, PvE content comes in the usual flavors of 6-person party dungeons, a few of which are available as you level through the main story, but most of them are at the game's current level 50 cap, and the alternate difficulties of those dungeons, including a very WoW Mythic Plus with affixes type versions, are also max level affairs. Don't worry, you'll be level 50 in almost no time. The leveling is almost trivial. If you want to pick a fight solo, Tatel's Tower is a neat solo boss fight, quote-unquote, secret dungeon that isn't a secret at all, as you'll open it as you quest around level 19. Each floor has additional boss challenges and timers to beat. You'll open up floors as you level, starting with the Firth floor? Yes, the Firth floor. It is nice, I will say, to see early challenges and dungeons that absolutely require parties or solo players in the tower's sake to respect mechanics or die. This only becomes even more important in the optional difficulty levels available at max level. And finally, on the kind of life skills portion, yes, there's fishing and cooking if you want to chill a bit, although it's nothing groundbreaking or new compared to other MMO competitors. And there is an Amatoy companion system, and these cute little fellas, they're another thing you can collect in your travels, much like you collect different morphs. You'll eventually gain access to your Amatoy house, where you can actually send these critters on timed expeditions to gather you crafting materials or other materials that you'll need along the way. Now, player housing was mentioned in a recent stream from the team, but that isn't in here just yet, and I did reach out to my contacts at NCSoft to ask if there was an update, and there's no update on it yet, so please look forward to it, I guess. Whatever content you decide to take part in, the primary progression initially is leveling and gear or skill upgrades. Upon reaching each level, you'll be given skill points to attribute to one of 4 attributes, each controlling different stat increases. This will likely be min-max to hell and back soon if it isn't already, so you may already see ideal stat point allocation for certain weapon build guides online if you want to do some research right now. You'll also be gathering resources to craft gear. By the way, crafting is nothing really interesting. It's mainly just menu-based and requires no real skill whatsoever. And you'll use those menus to upgrade gear and weapons. Now, this is where the research I warned you about at the start of the video is going to best serve you. As long as you're rocking the 2 weapons that you know are the best for your preferred playstyle, upgrade away. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You won't really be wasting these upgrade gems on your green gear, and you can feed your upgraded green gear to your new sexy blue rarity gear for a few upgrade levels when the time comes. It's not 1-to-1. You get fewer levels than you had on your green gear, but you do get some. Just remember, in this process, you will lose the green gear you're feeding to the blue gear, and this works all the way up the gear rarity chart. You can also buy or find gear with certain traits, secondary stat increases, on them, and feed those to your current weapons to add the traits that best serve your playstyle to your current gear. And there's a similar system used for both active and passive skill upgrades. You'll feed upgrade scrolls to each to level up your favorite skills up to 5 times, with each upgraded level providing more power in the way of damage or duration or cooldown reduction or other modifiers. Both the gear and skill upgrades, though, aren't 1-for-1. That means it isn't just one scroll or upgrade stone makes one level up. The upgrade items used have a chance to dish out various upgrade percentages, and only once you've reached 100% will your skill or weapon actually level up. It's kind of annoying, as these are the items that are plentiful to start, particularly on your first journey through the leveling pass, but acquisition, of course, slows down after that. There's multiple ways to obtain them. It'll just take a little longer to get them in later gameplay. Now let's move on to guilds, as they're very important, but there's a few things to know on this topic too. While I already alluded to the importance of guilds in the form of unlocking content, some PvP modes, and some open world bosses, guilds get quite a bit of power in Throne and Liberty. This is actually an area of the MMO that I'll be watching really closely. Now, we've had other games where guilds get to control certain areas of the map and levy taxes on things like delivery routes, and Throne and Liberty does allow that too. The controlling guild will occasionally need to defend itself from other guilds in the form of the large-scale PvP you've probably seen in trailers. This style of play is all well and good, until a handful of guilds consolidate power in many cases. Now, Amazon has said that they do have some things in place to stop that from happening, but I'll wait to actually see it first. They said they've implemented limits on how many guilds can ally themselves together, which is the theoretical way small guilds could unite to topple a large controlling guild. But if large guilds can ally at all, then how powerful are small allied guilds, really? The teams also pointed out that the castle itself isn't the only thing you might want to control in these PvP sieges, and small guilds could take over smaller areas of the map in the process for their own benefits, but they stopped shy of really giving any more raffle stomp prevention measures. This is certainly an aspect of Throne and Liberty to keep an eye on. Also, when it comes to loot, let's just say that Throne and Liberty has a interesting system. The guild has quite a bit of control over loot obtained while doing guild activities. You aren't going to just roll and if you win, take your loot and walk away. A lot of this is determined by guild ownership. Loot can actually be auctioned to the guild for lucent, the cash shop currency, and the leader could even limit who can actually bid on that loot in some ways. While I do encourage you to join a guild early, I would caution you not to just pick the first one that invites you. Given the control guilds can have and the corruption that could ensue, make sure you're okay with the way a guild dispenses loot and runs their ship before going hog wild to support them. If you could guild up with friends, that's all the better, because trust in the guild is going to be key. This segues nicely into talking about the Throne and Liberty cash shop and how it interfaces with the game's auction house. Being a free-to-play game, Throne and Liberty does, of course, have multiple currencies. We have Solent, the in-game currency you'll probably just call gold because that's what it is, just with a stupid different name. You'll have ornate coins, which you'll gain from your leveling and battle passes and other in-game activities and events, and that's used on cosmetics and some of the skill or weapon upgrade items. And then you'll have Lucent, Throne's cash shop currency that you buy with your cold, hard cash. This currency is account-wide, so you could farm it on alts and use it on your main if you wanted to. The cash shop currency clocks in at 1 per 2 cents USD, so $10 gets you 500. Your battle pass and your one-time leveling pass are 500 Lucent each, so grabbing both on your first character will cost you $20 if you want the premium rewards from both passes. There's also a ton of additional cosmetics that are purchased with Lucent in the way of the expected skins, but there's also new morphs and other things along those lines, so there is plenty to buy here if you do want to shell out cash and support the developers. Cosmetics purchased with Lucent are also usually account-wide. However, some other cosmetics, like the ones obtained in the Battle Pass, may be character-specific. So make sure to check before you plunk down any of the game's currencies for something. Of course, while the passes are nicely priced with the available Lucent bundles to buy, other cosmetics can be all over the place, and will likely result in you having just a little too much, or just being a little shy of the Lucent you needed for your next purchase, requiring another influx of cash to top off. Now, the interesting part to watch on the cash shop front is actually Throne and Liberty's in-game auction house. Auction houses are grouped by server region, so NA East servers, for example, will all share the same auction house. Now, initially, there's actually going to be 2 auction houses per region server, one for early access servers only, and one for launch day servers only. However, eventually those will be merged after launch sometime when the economies of the launch servers catch up to the early access servers. Now, the auction house itself, though, like the guild auctions I mentioned earlier, only accept Lucent, the cash shop currency, as payment. That means that, yes, in theory, you could spend cash on Lucent and buy whatever you want from the auction house to power up quickly. In practice, there's a few limitations on this. Gear obtained from, say, dungeons won't be able to be sold on the auction house, and any gear you actually upgraded won't then be able to be posted either. So as far as just buying super powerful upgraded gear with cash, no, you can't do that. You can use Lucent to buy the gear that has traits you want to feed that gear to your equipped gear to get the trait, but those are secondary stats again, so nothing super powerful here. That said, a lot of crafting materials are available on the auction house, meaning you could get the base gear for cash or buy with cash the materials needed to make yourself a better piece of gear, but at the end of the day, you'll still need to upgrade it. So in the end, can you get a jump on things with cash? Maybe. Buying base gear that's better than what you may have available to you right now may help your character's power level up a bit. And that's the gear score that's used to gate some content, that power level. But you'll never just be flat out buying the top level stuff. And while you can't actually buy the growth stones needed to upgrade your gear on the auction house, you can buy the gems used to craft the growth stones. That and the auction house, which is simply in your escape menu, by the way, don't look for it on the damn map, is restricted until you're level 40 anyway. It's kind of a gray area for many, I'm sure. It does come with the possible side effect of free players being able to gain cash shop currency, though, so that's nice. Neither the Battle Pass nor the Leveling Pass give you Lucent, so the primary way free players can get it is going to be the auction house or guild auctions. It doesn't cost Lucent to post anything, so if you get a snazzy drop that you don't need and it's eligible to post, you could net yourself some Lucent by throwing it on the auction house. By the way, there's no different versions of Lucent either, so if you have auction house earn Lucent, it can be spent on the exact same things that cash-purchased Lucent could buy. But as a reminder, there is no player trading, so the auction house is the only way to go here. So let's wrap this up with some of my final thoughts. There's actually quite a bit to like about Throne and Liberty so far. I really do love the visual style, although admittedly, that one's going to be a personal preference, so I understand if others don't. And I love the myriad of little touches to get you immersed in the MMO's world. On the flip side, while there are plenty of book collecting type menus to encourage you to explore the world and find all those little lore bits, some core systems actually seem designed to just port you all over the place quickly, and that kind of takes you out of the world. It's counterintuitive sometimes. I'm very much enjoying the story, even if it is filled with some predictable MMO beats, and the presentation is actually quite good. I'm not all that keen on the guild-style control or gameplay myself, but I do appreciate a more guild-focused MMO being out there for those that like that type of content and the large-scale PvP or territory control that goes with it. I think long-term, the balance of that content will probably determine the livelihood of Throne and Liberty long-term, so I'll definitely be watching that with eager anticipation. There's certainly worse free-to-play MMOs out there right now that have audiences, and Throne and Liberty doesn't seem, on the surface, as iffy as some previous NCSoft outings. But it is going to come down to one thing for me: support. This is an MMO that currently doesn't have a ton in it. Sure, you'll have hours of gameplay right now, but we know how MMO audiences are on churning through content. The roadmap for the rest of the year will see new dungeons and an effort to get the global version and the Korean version more on par content-wise, but we're not going to see things like the Tier 2 gear and other additions at the same time Korea saw them in their update cycles. So even the update cycles themselves aren't going to be the same as when they dropped in Korea. If guilds actually have a shot to contest things, and PvE content keeps coming for those that aren't into the PvP aspect, Throne and Liberty could actually do quite well for itself, barring some late-game shenanigans with the cash shop that's hard to foresee in early play right now. If support or balance gets off-kilter, though, it could have a shorter life than NCSoft is hoping for. I know eyes have been on the size of the Korean audience for a while now as a potential indicator of where things may head globally, but I think there are differences between the way the game is delivered in Korea and elsewhere that you should probably keep an eye on. Would I recommend it right now? Yeah, absolutely, sure. I've played worse, and at worst, I think you'd have a neat story and some cool dungeons to run with friends for a few weeks, minimum. If you're into the guild stuff, you got even more in front of you. What I'm most interested in is, will the content and support keep you playing 3 months from now or 6 months from now? We'll have to wait and see. I hope you've enjoyed this first look at Throne and Liberty. Make sure to visit MMOBomb.com and rate the MMO on its game page. Leave a review for your fellow gamers, of course, after you click like and subscribe up above. This has been Magic Man from MMOBomb.com saying stay safe, and we'll see you on the servers.